Greetings, everybody. My name is Ron K. Kaufman, and welcome to You've Got Some Nervous System. And today we're going to talk about why you get defensive. Why we all get defensive, right? We all get defensive sometimes. Come on, people. Don't get defensive about that, right? We all get defensive sometimes, right? But it's important to understand where that comes from so that we can, number one, understand ourselves better and just understand what's triggering us, what's going on for us. And two, eventually be able to handle it differently and even possibly engage in non-defensive communication instead of getting defensive and getting stuck in defensiveness, right? Wouldn't that be great, right? Now, but today we're just going to talk about why do we get defensive? Where does that come from? So in order to do that, I thought it would be helpful to start with a discussion about what does defensive even mean? What do we mean when we're talking about being defensive? We know it when we feel it, but what does it actually mean? So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, some dictionary definitions. One is very anxious to challenge or avoid criticism. That's one definition of being defensive. Very anxious to challenge or avoid criticism. Here's one more different dictionary definition. Argumentative, dismissive, or hostile when you feel that your beliefs, actions, intentions, or character are being questioned or attacked. Right? That sounds about right? Now, it's interesting, and I would argue pretty important to understand that one of the things that's going on when we start to feel defensive is we are having something called control confusion. We're having something called control confusion. Now, control confusion in general is when we get confused about something's happening and we get confused about what we do have control over and what we don't have control over. You would be surprised at how incredibly common this is. It seems obvious. I wouldn't be confused about that. I know what I have. I know I don't control the weather, and I know I do control my actions. Great. But it's a little more complicated than that, and people get pretty confused. So one of the things that happens here is we try to control and manage. We think that we can control or should be able to control what the other person, the person who's saying the thing that we're getting defensive about, we think that we should or we want to be able to control what that other person thinks, what they say, especially what they think, though. That tends to be the biggest thing. I don't want this person to think this thing, or I don't want the people overhearing this person to think this thing, right? So we get very wrapped up in that. Of course, we'd all like to be understood. We'd all like to be seen favorably, right? We'd all like to be seen accurately, right? I think a lot of us feel that way. But defensiveness comes not from that. That's actually not the cause of defensiveness, even though it can seem like it. The cause of defensiveness is when we need those things, meaning we need to be seen favorably or accurately or to be understood. We need those things in order to feel okay. We need to have that in order to feel okay. When we think that this is something that we have ultimate control over, what this other person thinks or says, we just don't have control over that. So when we get wrapped up in this, we do have control over whether we are defensive or whether we feel defensive, but we don't actually have control over what this other person says or thinks, right? So this is what I mean by control confusion. We get this twisted around. We start to think, I can or should be able to control what this other person thinks or says. But once they say it, I don't have any control over how I feel about it or how I react to it, right? It's actually exactly the reverse of that. It's the exact reverse of that. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, you might notice how it feels. If you feel defensive, you might feel fear, like a sudden feeling that you might feel anger. You might feel just more of a sense of physical, like a tightness in your body, a tightening in your stomach, or a tightening in your chest, right in the moment when you're starting to get that defensive trigger. So that's okay, by the way. There's nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with being defensive. There's nothing wrong with feeling defensive. There's not even anything wrong with acting defensive, even though most people don't like it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's part of our whole spectrum of emotions, part of the spectrum of our humanity. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not having this talk with you so that you can stamp out any vestige of defensiveness that you may ever have. It's okay to be defensive. It's totally fine. But you may be curious about why Like, where's this coming from inside of you? And maybe you're wanting to change how you communicate around that. Maybe that's not even going to be our focus for today. We'll do that on a different episode. But for today, just to even just understand what the heck is going on, and maybe some initial first steps we can take. Okay, so here's the first thing I want to just tell you. A big problem that gets us into a defensive mode of thinking and acting is it's a version of binary thinking. Now, binary thinking is when we think there are two choices, when in reality, there are more, often far more than two choices. This doesn't only happen with being defensive. This happens with lots of different things in our lives, but it happens in particular in the area of being defensive, because what we do is we think to ourselves, this is the binary part of it. We think there's only two choices. There's far more choices. Is either I fight it and I defend myself, this thing that's being said about me or thought about me, or I just do nothing and let it stand, right? So people think they're caught in that binary decision. And of course, very few of us want to just sit back and let it stand. So since our only two choices are we sit back and let it stand or we fight it, most of us in that situation are going to choose to fight it, right? But it's not a binary equation. Those are two choices. Those are two legitimate choices. But they're not the only two choices. There's tons of other choices that are not those two choices, right? So there's saying something about it in a relaxed way. There's being curious and questioning the other person about it. There's another bunch of choices in addition to that. The point is there aren't only two. The choices aren't only I fight it or I just sit back and let it stand and make no attempt to correct the record, right? Those are just two. So we want to just always be aware we're never stuck in a binary equation. That's true, that's true for anything, but it's true in these situations in particular. So we just want to keep in mind that if we're starting to go down this road, it means we are in some way taking what's happening personally. And that leads us into what we could call the 7 defensiveness triggers, the 7 defensiveness triggers. And I'm going to tell them to you right now. These are the 7 ways that we take things personally when someone says something to us that is then going to be most likely to trigger a defensive reaction in us. So I'm going to read them to you. Some of them are going to really ring true. Different ones are going to ring true for different ones of you, because we don't all always do all 7, right? Sometimes you might be a person who does number 1 a lot. Someone else might be someone who does number 5 a lot, right? Or someone else might be someone who does number 1, 2, 3, and 4 a lot. So I'll read them to you, or I'll talk through them. You tell me what you think about them. So number 1 is I'm being picked on. Right? This is something we're saying to ourselves inside of our heads that's going to immediately lead to a defensive reaction. I'm being picked on. So someone's saying something to us, maybe it's one person, maybe it's more than one person, maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's a family member, but we then go to this place in our head of I'm being picked on. And then we get in this, right? What do you do when you're picked on, right? You go like this when you're being picked on. Right? Even metaphorically, emotionally, we do this, right? So as soon as you say to yourself, I'm being picked on in your mind, you're going to be defensive. You're definitely going to be defensive. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, I'm being falsely or unjustly accused. Now, here's why I like it. First of all, this one is super common. But here's the other reason why I like it is because it dispatches a misconception that I hear a lot. The misconception that I hear a lot is you're only getting defensive because somewhere inside you know it's true. That's why it's bothering you so much. That's why you're being so defensive. And here's the problem with that. There are definitely times when that is true. Like, for sure, I've worked with a lot of people in situations where they get defensive because they do think it's true and they feel bad about it and they're trying to defend them, cover that up or defend it. That does happen. But that is absolutely not the only reason that someone gets defensive, and it's not the only time that someone gets defensive. So just because the reason I really don't like that that's in the culture as the reason why everyone gets defensive is because then everybody who does number 2, which is I'm being falsely or unjustly accused, thinks that like none of this applies to them, because then they're like, but if someone says I robbed the store and I really didn't rob the store and I get really defensive and fight against it, that doesn't mean secretly somewhere inside of me I think I did rob the store. right? Now, it's also true that if I did rob the store and someone accuses me of robbing the store, yes, I might get super defensive. Sure. But that's only one way. That's one type of being defensive, right? One reason, right? The other is, and again, very popular, is I'm being falsely or unjustly accused. That feeling, and it can feel very emotional, very scary. If you feel like you're being accused of something that's genuinely false, is not true about you. No, I'm not a judgmental person, or no, I didn't say that such and such comment to this person, right? If you feel genuinely falsely or unjustly accused, people get really locked up about that. And yes, it leads to lots of defensive feelings and defensive behaviors for sure. So that's number 2. Let's go to number 3. Number 3 is closely related to number 2, but it's a version of it. And it's another version of this isn't true about me, which is I'm being misunderstood. I hear this a lot. I'm being misunderstood. That's not what I meant. That's not where I was coming from. That's not what I was trying to do. That's not how I was trying to make this person feel. I'm being misunderstood. Right? So again, if you start getting into that, I'm being misunderstood, you're going to get into a defensive mode for sure. Okay, number 4. This one's different. This one's closer to number 1, but slightly different. I'm being pushed around. I'm being pushed around. Now, when people feel this way, regardless of whether they feel like the criticism is true or not, if they feel like they're being pushed around, then what's going to happen is, for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, they're going to feel like they have to be defensive because that's the only way to protect myself if I'm being pushed around. Now, that's not true, that's the only way to protect yourself, but a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people have been taught that, so they come at it from that stance. Okay, let's go to number 5. This is one I hear from a lot of people. I'm being called out or embarrassed or humiliated. I'm being called out or embarrassed or humiliated. This tends to apply to times we get defensive in a situation that is not one-on-one, right? It's much less common in a one-on-one. It's often in groups. It can even be small groups. It doesn't have to be a large group, but it's usually in some kind of group where we feel like we're on public display, even in a small way. And then we feel like we're being called out or embarrassed or humiliated in a public way. So then people get super defensive about that in many cases, right? Again, I'm not saying that's the only option, right? We talked about binary thinking. It doesn't mean you have to get defensive, but this is generally what happens. Okay, let's go to another one. This one I just call I'm the bad guy, which is just sort of like someone saying or expressing something and I'm now feeling like I'm being made into the bad guy. I'm being made into the bad guy. And then, no, I'm not the bad guy. I don't want to be the bad guy, right? And then we get defensive. So that's another piece of this. Now, there is a number 7 here that I do want to talk about a bit. And I just, it's just, this one's a little bit long. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it directly off the page because I want to get it correct. And I just want you to hear this as I'm reading. Just see if this feels like it applies to you, okay? I'm being forced to do something I don't want to do because I'm afraid that if I don't do it, I will be disliked or judged or bad in some way. So let me read that again. It's a little long. I'm being forced. Now, this is not about physical force. This is not in situations where you are being physically forced or physically threatened, right? So that's a criminal situation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about emotional stuff, right? But here, let me read it to you again. I'm being forced to do something that I don't want to do. And in terms of the force part, because I'm afraid that if I don't do it, if I say no, if I say I don't want to do that, I don't want to participate, I don't want to be a part of this, I don't want to go along with this, I don't want to agree to this. If I say that, then I'm afraid that I will be disliked or judged or made into the bad guy. Right? Okay, you with me on that? So that if oftentimes when people, this used to be probably the main reason when I was younger, this was probably the main reason why I would get defensive, because I often felt like I had to say yes to things I didn't want to say yes to, right? Because if I didn't, people would judge me, people wouldn't like me, people would think I was being a jerk, right? So I felt like I had to. So then my only way to combat that, because I was like getting tired of always going the other person's way, was then I had to get defensive. That was my only way of combating that, right? So that's another one. That's number 7. Now, I want to just say a couple of more things about this. So those are the 7 the 7 most common triggers, the 7 defensiveness triggers. So just think about which ones most apply to you. Last portion of this discussion I want to do, and this is just about how to start to become less defensive on the inside. Now, there's a lot more to this. I could spend, and I'm not exaggerating, I could spend another hour talking to you about the exact ways to handle criticism and how to not be defensive and what to do instead and what to say to the other person. We're gonna have that on an episode eventually. But it's an entire other discussion. But what I do want to start with is just at least some places to start inside yourself when you start to feel yourself going down this road. All right. Hope this is helpful for you. So the first thing is you want to start to notice what's going on. Like the first thing is you just want to start practicing tuning into yourself a little more. And you want to notice if someone says something and you feel a tightness in you. You know, you feel a tightness in your stomach or your chest or your throat, and you feel like a rush of some kind of emotion. Could be anger, could be fear, right? Either one. But you start to feel a rush of emotion and a feeling in your body. That's going to tell you immediately, like, okay, I'm going into defensive land, right? But again, defensive land is not the bad guy. It's okay to be defensive. It's okay to feel that way. I'm not trying to get you to stamp this out. I'm trying to encourage you to notice it, see what's going on, right? Okay, so that's the first piece, is just start to notice this. I call it, the term I use for this is practicing the interoception of defensiveness. Practicing the interoception of defensiveness. Interoception, if you're not familiar with that word, it's a word in the dictionary, and it is two ways to describe it. It's the brain's ability to detect and decipher signals from the body, or another way to look at it is the mind's ability to detect and decipher signals from the nervous system. That's interoception. So this is practicing the interoception of defensiveness, like getting better at tuning in and noticing what's going on. And then that's the detecting part, noticing the tightness, noticing the emotion. That's the detecting part. The deciphering part is then being able, and this takes some practice, then being able to see, this is happening in me. Oh, that's defensiveness. That's where I am at with this. That's the deciphering part. So it's detecting and deciphering, right? So it's really helpful. The better this I can promise you, the more practice you get at that, the better you'll be. And the better you are at it, the more you'll understand yourself, and you will also start to notice your reactions changing. Even if you don't do, all the rest of what I might advise you in a separate class. We have a whole class, Kate C. Wild and I, that we teach in a course that we run called Rise Above. It's an advanced, in-depth course, and we have one of the classes in that is all about non-defensive communication. And it's really useful, powerful, helpful, helps people's nervous systems, but it also helps people's communication relationships. So this is just the entry point into that. So so the first thing is that you're going to practice the interoception of defensiveness, right? It's really important not to try to suppress these feelings. This isn't about that. It's about noticing them and allowing them. Okay? And then once you notice that, you can actually say to yourself, I'm feeling defensive right now. You don't have to say it out loud if you feel like you're in front of people and you don't want to say that. I'm not saying you have to say it to the other person, but you want to say it to yourself. I'm feeling defensive right now. Right? Not I'm feeling defensive right now and I've got to let this go. I'm feeling defensive right now. I got to stop. I got to shift gears. I'm not talking about that. That if you do that right away, you're going to end up suppressing important parts of your own emotional life. So you don't want to do that. You just want to say, I'm feeling defensive right now, to yourself. Just notice that. You're going to remind yourself, if you can, that, okay, this can't hurt me. It's just a feeling. It's just an emotional state. It's okay. It doesn't feel good. It feels crappy, but it's okay. It just feels crappy. I'm going to live through it. It's okay. It can't hurt me. So I'm going to allow this feeling. I'm going to let this happen. I'm going to let this be here in me without like doing battle with it or trying to fix it in air quotes, right? That's important because if you can get in touch with, first of all, it's just good for your mental and emotional health. It's good for your nervous system. But the other reason it's important is because it's going to stop you from doing the least helpful thing. And again, I'm not talking about the feelings. We're not suppressing feelings here. But it's going to stop you from doing the least helpful thing, which is an action, which is trying to fix the emotional state you're in by getting the other person to change. By change, I just mean take it back, apologize, say it's not really true, say, oh, yes, that's a good point. You're not really like that, right? Doing that, jumping into that right away as an attempt to just suppress and sort of change and fix your own emotional state is not going to get you where you want to be. I promise it's not going to get you where you want to be. And it's almost never going to work anyway to get them to change what they're thinking or saying anyway. Usually they'll push back harder anyway. So even if it worked, it wouldn't be a good idea, but it rarely works. So it's even worse idea. Okay, so then a couple of other points about it. See if you can refrain as best you can once you're aware of feeling these things, especially if you have some time alone later and you're stewing about it a little bit. See if you can refrain from thinking about what it means and making up lots of stories about it. That's what we tend to do. I used to do this a lot, which is like, oh, you're thinking, I can't believe they said that about me. And they said it about me in front of my coworkers. I just cannot believe that. It's not even true about me. You know, they've been out to get me for a long, I've been thinking about this. This person has been out to get me for a long, you know what? Great. This is great. Because now my coworkers are going to think this is true about me anyway, because they just said it, right? Right? So these are all, what I just did, that's all examples of making stories about it. This is what my coworkers are going to think. This is going to hurt my career. This person's been trying to get me all along. We make lots of stories about what it's going to bring to our future and what it means about the past and what it means about the other person, what it means about us. Instead of just saying, going back to the beginning, which is like, yeah, I'm feeling defensive. Absolutely. And even, I don't like what they said. That's okay. If you say that, hey, I don't like what they said and I'm feeling defensive about it. Nothing wrong with that. That's different than making up lots of stories about it. Okay, here's another one. This one is the last step I'm going to give you. I'm going to be honest, probably the hardest. It's probably the hardest, but it's super powerful. And that is just try this. Again, you don't have to do it. Try it out. See if you think this, see if you can pull this off. Okay, it's something I have gotten much better at over the years, which is see if you can be curious about the other person and what's going on for them. The person who said the thing that you're defensive about. I'm not talking about, curious doesn't mean I agree. Okay, I just want to be very clear. It just means I'm not fighting it, number one. And number two, I'm actually curious and interested in like, where is this coming from? Does not mean I agree. Doesn't mean I'm capitulating. It doesn't mean I'm even stipulating any facts here. It just means, this person said this. Where's this coming from? Where are they coming from with it? What's going on? Like maybe there's stuff here that I'm not aware of. I don't understand. I could be curious about it, right? So it's being curious about them and what's going on for them. You can even say something like, by the way, this is incredibly powerful because it will often surprise the other person and take the wind out of their sails, but it is in no way a put down or an attack on the other person. And that is, tell me more about that. So if they say, you're a this, you do this a lot, you're a that kind of thing, even if they say it in front of people, if you really want to go with this, you can be curious, genuinely curious. This isn't a trick to try and trick them. This is like getting yourself into a curious place and going, so you think I'm blah, blah, blah. Tell me more about that. Like with genuine curiosity, like, oh, okay, you think I did this, you think I feel this way, you think I act this way, you think I'm this kind of person, you think I don't do X or Y or Z enough. Tell me more about that. It's so rare for someone who's saying something against another person or something that might be attacking the other person. It's so rare for the person to be responded to that way. It will usually completely like knock them off. The goal is not to knock them off anything, but I'm saying it often will because it's just so rare for that to happen, for someone to genuinely and with curiosity go, tell me more about that after they've just been potentially attacked. I say potentially because it's not necessarily true that their intent is to attack you. I want to be clear on that too. That's happening in your head. They may be trying to attack you. They may not be trying to attack you. We actually don't know. That's why it's good to be curious. That's why it's good to be curious because you don't freaking know, right? So that's what you want to, if you're willing to, that's what you want to try out. You could say that. You could then ask if they actually answer. You could ask some follow-up questions. Ask where their feelings and their statements are coming from. See where it goes from there. Again, there's a lot more. There's several layers deeper we could go to it. There's like, in the non-defensiveness class that we do in the Rise Above course, we talk about like what to do if you feel like what they're saying is true about you, what to do if what they're saying is false about you, or what to do if you're actually not sure. So there's a whole different ways to address things, but I don't want to go there because it's number one, that's a deeper class. Number two, I just don't want to overcomplicate this for you. I want to give you something simple to start with. So see if you can start there, see what that does for you.